Welcome to the ETF's Learning Connects live session. Today, our focus is on youth skills and well-being. Why is the well-being of young people important for skills development? What can be done to ensure one supports the other? Which conditions are needed? How can we engage the wider stakeholder community for young people's well-being and their skills? What can we learn from Serbia, for example? And importantly, how can we engage young people more in developing the policies which directly affect them? Are there examples we can learn from? To answer these questions today, let me welcome our guests. We have Snežana Klašnja, Minister Advisor, Ministry of Tourism and Youth from Serbia. Welcome, Snežana.
Welcome. Nice to see all of you.
Thank you. And we have Manuela Prina, Head of Skills Identification and Development Unit, from the European Training Foundation. Welcome, Manuela. We can't hear you, Manuela. Yes. At least I couldn't. No, unfortunately not. Maybe now, yes. I'll continue and hopefully maybe you can have that checked. No, unfortunately not. Well, this perhaps is an opportunity. I'll say a brief hello to guests who will... Yes, now I can hear you.
Good.
Welcome, Manuela. Thanks for joining us. And I'm Denise Loughran, your host for today, ETF's Communication Officer. We are live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter. So thank you very much for joining us. And I already see we have a number of guests for today. So please let us know where you're from. Post your questions in the chat and engage in the conversation. So let's get started. I'll start with you, Snežana. Would you like to give us a brief introduction about yourself and explain to us why is there such an increased focus now on the well-being of young people?
Thank you, Denise. I'm Snežana Klašnja. As you said, I'm coming from the Ministry of Tourism and Youth, previous Ministry of Youth and Sport from the Serbia. And I was working many years as the Assistant Minister for Youth. Now I am advisor of the Minister for the Youth Policy. If you're talking about the importance of this well-being issue for youth, I must say that for us, I don't think for everyone, young people are the basic human capital. They are resource, they are driving force for any society. If you look at the well-being as the material and the spiritual wealth and the state when one is happy and very successful, that we must think how to get to the well-being of the young people. I think that we must continuously invest in the young people, first in their knowledge, their skills, of course, and to create the conditions from them to have the economic and social independence, especially in the time of crisis, pandemic, refugees, disasters, natural problems. We must think about the young people because they are much more have the consequences for their mental health from the all age people. So also I want to state that European Union declared the 2022 as the year of the youth, 2023 as the year of course of the skills. Why? Because they know that without investing in the prosperity of the young people, there is no progress in the human society. I think also that every successful education system, education centers and companies must take care about the well-being of the students or employees. So because and also it's very important for the young people because they are just in the developing phase. They are very sensitive to the opinion of the peers of the community, and they do not have so strong defense mechanism if they have a trouble. So look at them, help them, and we will have the better present and future.
Okay, thank you, Snežana, for that excellent introduction. I'll pass to you now, Manuela. If you would like to elaborate on this connection that Snežana spoke about between well-being, skills development, and employment, please.
Thanks, Denise, and thanks to Snežana for her introduction. Indeed, we need to put together the well-being with the work that ETF does together with the partner countries on education, skills development, and employment. And why is this so important? There are several reasons. The first one is that in times when education and training, as well as skills development opportunities, are limited for different reasons, and when also employment opportunities are blocked or disrupted, as it was the case during the pandemic, there is, of course, an impact on the well-being of people of all ages. And this has then effects that limit even further the ability of people to be active. And we know that being active and searching for solutions and also trying to overcome obstacles in our daily life, which is also often linked to employment and to opportunities, is a very important skill. We call it resilience, the ability to react, to take an active role towards our opportunities. Now, when this ability is impacted by several conditions, and of course the pandemic, and also the aggression of Ukraine and all the consequences that this has generated, not only in Ukraine, but in many countries of the world, in terms, for example, of utilities and access to opportunities, has generated an impact. And this, of course, limits the possibilities for people to take opportunities, but also to be actively engaged in skills development, in employment, and in turns to be part of the society in a positive manner. Why are we talking about this so much lately? Well, first of all, it's not that before the pandemic, the issue of well-being did not exist. But surely the pandemic has brought to the attention of policymakers a situation that has definitely been increased. So the numbers of the percentage of people that have been either impacted by difficult conditions, either in access to opportunities, in disruption of employment prospects, has generated a number of effects in terms of mental health and well-being, and vice versa. There has been an impact of the situation that has generated pressure and stress and different conditions for people that then had an impact on involvement in skills development, so increase of dropout rates, for example, for young people, but also inabilities to use opportunities that are there in terms of access to training, in diversification of employment opportunities, etc. I just give you a reference, a recent study with that ETF has conducted with the Eurofound, has really looked into the feedback both from the European Union as well as partner countries working with the ETF. And we see there is a really high percentage of people that signals that it's very difficult to have a decent work-life balance, and that the issues facing families and citizens right now have consequences also for access to education and training, as well as to employment opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Manuela. And I think my colleagues now, they will post in the chat the link to the study you are referring to, the joint study between the European Training Foundation and it's another EU agency, Eurofund, and also a study which ETF undertook jointly with UNICEF. So before I move to my next question, I would like to say hello to those who have joined us. We have quite a few people joining us. We have Keno from Kosovo, Krisa from Greece, Christina from Spain, Irina from Albania, Benoit from France, Mosaid from Saudi Arabia, and Beatrice from Italy. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us. And please post your questions in the chat. We will be happy to take them. So turning back to you, Snežana, I mean, Manuela, she mentioned this issue of resilience, which follows on from what you were saying about young people's defense mechanisms are still evolving, their ability to cope. So would you like to tell us more about that? And I mean, do the issues that young people are facing, how do they differ according to geography, gender, ethnicity? Can you give us some examples from your experience?
Thank you, Denise. Yes, of course, that all these things are very important for youth, and there are differences. We have the youth are not the same cohort. They are different. We have the very all youth are vulnerable group. But within the youth, we have also the vulnerable groups also. We can see the differences where we are talking about the youth in Serbia. The youth are people from 15 up to 30 years old. So there are differences about the age, about the gender, and also about the geography, especially the regional context. So when we talk about the employment and self-employment of the young people, we can see that, for example, in Serbia, every year we have the better results than the previous year, but still we have the very huge unemployment rate with the young people. It's about 20%, but in European Union countries, it's 13%. I'm now talking about the data which we can compare. That means here from 15 up to 29. So also, if we are talking about self-employment, we can see that only the 23% of the young women in Serbia are entrepreneurs, and others are men. So that's another differences. Also, the research, every year the Ministry of Youth and Tourism are taking the research about the position of the young people. Some questions are repeated every time so that we can see for 7 years, for example, the trends, how the things are going on. The research show that about 39% of the young people really like to start their own job. But when we saw who are they are usually the men. They are usually up of 20 years and from the urban areas and from Belgrade. Who don't want to start their own business? It's 42% of the people answered, but it's usually from the women. They are not so interested. Also, the most of unemployed young people are in the region we call that south and eastern of Serbia, but the best situation is of course in Belgrade. Also, we can see that in rural areas the employability and the people who are young people in the need category are much more than in other parts of the countries. We can see also in the ETF study the position of young people in Serbia. That informal youth employment rate was almost 30%, but the rate of the entire working age of population was 20%. That means that the young people has struggling much more with that issue. If you're talking about non-formal, formal or non-formal education in European Union's informal education, in 2022, 41% of the people aged 30-35 have tertiary education, but much more women than men. In Serbia, it was only 33%, also 12% much
Thank
more
you.
for women.
Snežana, I'm just going to stop you there, and I'm grateful for all those statistics that you've given us. And I know in our chat we're also posting the link to some information that you've shared with us. So you've highlighted, I mean, the disparity. Okay, the disparity we know from studies between the EU and the EU's neighbouring regions, but also, as you say, within countries. So what are the solutions to address this disparity? I mean, can you give us some examples? You've mentioned now about non-formal learning. Could you elaborate a little on that for us?
Yeah, the only solution is that the young people must be the agenda of the whole society. That means that they must be the topic of the different ministries, not only ministry responsible for youth, local self-government, also other people who are participate. Parents also must think about the well-being of the young people, and we must work with the parents also to make the better capacity, for example, of teachers and parents to understand why it is important to have the better link between formal and non-formal education, because we in Serbia now within the new strategy, I will talk later on about the strategy, but we put also that it's very important that in the youth centers, youth clubs, offices, local youth offices, there is the people who are youth workers, who have the standards in their work, that space must be also very safety, must be that everyone can come and to learn and to teach. So the young people are interested, but not so much in the non-formal education. When we ask them, they think that it's very important. 63% said yes, it's very important. When we ask, did they participate? It was only quarter of them. So the topics they are interested is usually personal development, entrepreneurial, employability. But now in last year we have also the ecological aspects. We can understand why health and of course the things of the human rights.
Okay, and now, Snežana, I think we have a little bit of interference, but just now, as you're mentioning these topics, I think it's a good opportunity to link to a question which has been posted to us by Namik from Baku in Azerbaijan. So it's about technology. So, I mean, how important is technology for young people, focusing on technology also for their inclusion in wider society? And is this something that is possibly better addressed in the non-formal sector, in non-formal training, excuse me?
Of course, the technology is really important. All of the young people, they grow up with the technology. So we saw in the pandemic time why it was important to find a solution with distance learning. Not only they, for example, cannot have the physical contact. So the technology is very good, but the young people must learn how to use the technology, how to have the critical thinking, how to have the media literacy, because everything can you find, but you don't know who give the information, why can you believe in that. So the task of all of us is to give them a non-formal education about also, of course, in the formal also, but if they do not have the same, so how to use the technology. And it's what is the something which is very good for technology, very quickly the information can come to everyone. That's very good. And of course, the whole world is connected. So they can see everything what is happened in the whole world. And for them, it's very good. But to know, to understand and to critical thinking about the news they see. And they can learn, of course, many educational materials, many things they can find really in the digital space.
Okay, thank you, Snežana. And I'll just say briefly hello to more guests that have joined us before I turn now again to Manuela. So we have Nedelica from Serbia. Sorry for my pronunciation. We have Lamprini or Miss Lamprini from Greece. We have Daniela from Republika Srpska. We have Sean from Sweden. So thanks to all of you for joining us in this discussion about youth well-being and skills development. So I'm going to turn to you now, Manuela, with actually a bit of a provocative question. I hope you don't mind. But are skills the answer? I mean, are we maybe not putting too much of a burden on our young people that they need to develop their skills to be better included? Are we not switching the shift from societal issues onto young people? What do you think?
It's a difficult question, absolutely. Let me take the answer in from the words of young people, and I start with a story. Last year, we have been working in an initiative, a very nice initiative of the company that you all know, Huawei, that has put up a leadership academy for female leaders in the IT sector. Something that, you know, really where you have participants that are extremely advanced, smart, entrepreneurial, etc. And as ETF, we work with this group of fantastic girls to focus on digital skills and ask them the question how we can actually look at digital skills in the future. And the idea was for them to really identify a challenge that it's important to pick up at the level of policies. Now, this group of amazing girls that are very familiar with advanced technology issues and STEM, etc., they pointed out to one single issue, and it was mental health. And I have to tell you that when they came up with that issue, and they offer some solutions, and we will share with you in the chat the link to the policy brief that they developed, I was extremely surprised because I did not expect to have that on the table. And I think that the answer to your question, Denise, on are we putting too much on the plate of our young people, it's coming from young people themselves that tells us it's important that we look at skills and we look at how we can help the youth, but also the adults to be more aware and to develop new skills that are important in today's society. So this is absolutely something that we need to look not in terms of adding, in terms of putting more emphasis in what we ask to young people to deliver or to be part of, but how we help young people to navigate, to be resilient, as we said before, and to be active in a society which is definitely more and more complex. Now, data tell us that indeed in the last few years, as we also invest in digital skills, for example, issues such as anxiety, depression, being exposed to cyberbullying and other types of issues that we know are part of the digital environment are also growing. And these require new skills, not only for the youth, but also for the teachers, for youth workers that are in contact with young people. But as Snežana was saying, it's also a skill for parents, for families, because it's a word that us as parents don't master. So I don't know if you have the opportunity to spend time with a young person or with a child playing online. It's really a word that for them is a normal place to navigate, and for us it's really something new. But it's important we get to know it, because our policies and the discussions that we do about the future of education, the future of skills, the future of youth need to take into account the world that the young people live into. And that is not only a game place, it's a learning place, it's an employment place, it's a place where we link we build connections, and we build the society of the future. So it's extremely important that we take this into account, not only as a request to the youth, but as a request to all of us, including a request to policymakers to know what is this world about, and to make sure that our policies embrace and take care of these new needs that the society has.
Thank you, Manuela. So if I understand you correctly, it's that, I mean, there's no doubt the skills are essential, but it's how we approach them. I mean, our times have changed and we need better approaches and addressing, well, what mental health issues that you say, but issues that have been there for a long time, which, as Snežana mentioned earlier, which have now come to the surface. I noticed also that you've mentioned now about stakeholders, and I see that we have the engagement of many stakeholders. We have quite a number of questions also about this, and perhaps I'll just take a moment now to pause and look at the questions. We have a question from Benoit about the articulation or complementary actions with inclusive education. I think perhaps it would be good if we had a bit more information on what you were looking for on that, Benoit, and we would be happy to, I'm sure my guests will be happy to elaborate on those. We also have Arlinda from Albania, okay, who gives her thanks for this session. Arlinda has been working 10 years with the program Fit for Future in Albania. She's also mentioning the challenges, as you say, Manuela, but vulnerabilities, mental health, and how important it is that these are emotional intelligence and empathy are addressed in the curricula. Yes, Arlinda also then refers to the need to engage parents and teachers, and I think I'll turn to you now, Snežana, about, I mean, your experience engaging wider stakeholders within the system, within the development of young people's skills and well-being. Would you like to share some of your experience on that topic with us? Thank you.
Thank you, Denise, for this, and all people who put the questions in a chat. I think that really we must think also how to involve not only the teachers, peers, but also the parents, because they're the persons who are very, very important for the development of the young people. First of all, they must be convinced why they know why the formal education is important, but they must find a way why the non-formal education is also important. So we try to work, and some of the NGO organizations which we finance, with the parents to discover what the youth workers can do for their children, and also how they can have the better capacity, and they go through the different seminars, but by the active learning methods. So if you're talking about the education, inclusive education, for example, in Serbia, you can find very, very good solutions in the law of youth, law of the education system. Also the law of youth are talking about the principle of the equality, but inclusion, that now we have in our schools much more young people who are with disabilities who are going through individual programs, but in the regular schools. There is a chance to them to grow up with their peers and to take the activities together. It's usually sometimes the problem for the parents, sometimes problems for the teachers to understand why it's important, for example, also the Roma children, because they're usually those who are with the very, very bad results in the primary education, secondary education. We have the affirmative measures for them, how that they can come to the faculty. And now the situation, when we look 5 years ago and now, is much better, but still is much more to do, and to really give a chance to everyone to talk. For example, some days ago, there are the model schools working with the different young people with the different abilities together. We saw that the teachers try to put on some kind of the performance, all of them, but the Roma girls was sitting not as the actor, but as the public. So that's the problem. We must, even she knows that she must be involved in with full capacities. So the things that we must have the seminars about also the capacities of the teachers, parents, youth workers, and to recognize the much more why youth work is important, because they really can come to those young people which we call the invisible young people, people in the need category, people in the rural areas who do not go in the education system. So they can provide them, and we have also that kind of the youth space, which is without paying. And especially now we have one project with Western Bank Youth, Western Bank, Western Balkans Youth Laboratory. About it was the first phase was about the unemployment. Now it's about the mental health. The young people choose the topic, not the representatives of the government. And we have the common emergency system, because if we do not involve those who are young together to make the decisions with those who are in the government, we do not succeed.
Okay, thank you, Snežana. And I hear some interference. I hope everyone can still follow the conversation. As I was saying, Snežana, you have also compliments in the chat from Nedelica, who I believe is in Serbia, about the Serbian strategy for youth and the measures that are being implemented to help vulnerable groups. Manuela, I've noticed we have a range of questions, so I think I'm going to attempt to merge a couple of questions in one for you, all very challenging, which I know is just what you. First of all, we have a question from Migena about the issue of cyber security in school, and what is the biggest challenge? When should it be introduced? Already, should it be done in primary school? What do you think of that? And perhaps I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll move to another question after.
Thanks, Denise. Yes, the issue of I would say the exposure of young people and I would say children to the digital world is, I would say, happening very early now. So we all observe that, in fact, we see very young kids being exposed already to the digital world. So here, I mean, I think that it's important I share with you 3 points. The first is something that the ETF has been working on, especially in the last few years, and my colleagues will share a link, is what we call a digital reform framework that really puts also well-being and mental health as one of the dimensions that we really need to reinforce in the architecture of our programs. And as I see also from some other questions, when we think about inclusion in education, but also we think about key competencies. So as you know, the European Union has also developed what we call a digital competence, which is a transversal competence that starts really from primary school and moves forward with very specific examples on how to make this happen and how to integrate this in the curricula. However, this is not enough, because we know that it's not only the school where we need to act on these competencies, but also where we build, let's say, the safety for the growth and the skills development of our youth. But as Snežana was saying, it's all the worlds where young people are. So it's very important that we invest in youth workers and in their skills and awareness to really be attentive and accompany the development of young people, also in the way they interact with the digital world. And third is the families. So, well-being of young people doesn't mean to make them happy. If a child is happy to spend 8 hours a day in front of a screen or to playing a game online, yeah, he's happy, but we are not doing something for his or her well-being. It's not something good. Because we know that the mental health is something that we build with the interaction, the understanding, the ability to really interact in a rational, in a positive manner, and also to be aware of what could be the dangers that are behind the scenes. So to do that kind of work, it's very important that the generation that is above the threshold of youth is also being part of our plans. And this is why it's so complex, because it's very difficult to reach this holistic view. I think right now we have elements in place, both at policy level in the European Union and in, I would say, with the COVID, all countries have really adopted new tools and new visions to act on this, and then to cascade that down in the world of education, but also in those worlds where young people are living and are interacting. So
Okay,
this is, I think, important.
Thank you, Manuela. So you mentioned the European Union's key competences, the digital key competence. Now I see we have an elaboration, I think, from Benoit on his previous question about inclusive education. Is not possible without self-esteem, confidence, and open-mindedness. And this would also be covered in the wider key competence framework, which we can share in the chat with you. I see my colleagues have already also shared some other frameworks in the chat, so I hope they are useful for you, Benoit. I would like to turn to another question here, also for you, Manuela. I think it relates to the point you mentioned earlier about how important it is to engage young people directly in the policies which affect them, and also it's coming from Turkey. Turkey is one of the ETF's partner countries. So Faith is referring to, yes, the tragedy and the trauma that has occurred recently with the earthquake, and asking how ETF is involved here or could be involved here. And ETF is often involved in fragile and conflict areas. So I pass over to you, Manuela, to elaborate more on that.
Thanks. First of all, I want to say that we are really close to all our Turkish and Syrian friends, and we really care very much about the situation. I have to say that ETF in the last few years has been working very closely with an organization that is very present also in the countries, and it's UNICEF. And with them, we have shared also at the beginning of our session a couple of studies and that actually collect the voices of young people from Europe and Central Asia. But with UNICEF, we are also working in particular on providing support, in particular for mental health and resilience. We've also done this, and we continue doing this in Ukraine. And with them, we are closely cooperating also for supporting young people affected by the earthquake recently. We're also working with them in the partner countries where we are present. What I can say is that for us, it's important, and we work primarily, of course, with stakeholders in the country that have a responsibility on policies, and with them, we are on one side putting certain activities on hold because the emergency has the priority on everything else. And on the other side, we are there to redirect our support as it's necessary. So it's very important that those needs are on one side collected and shared with us so that we can see together with the European Union, the delegation to Turkey, to see how ETF can be of use to support young people affected by the earthquake through the activities and through the partnerships we have with organizations that are on the ground and with the authorities that are there. So we are there for you.
Thank you, Manuela. Snežana, I will address the next question to you from Migena. It's about the importance of the collaboration of local organizations to improve school programs and curricula. What do you think of this point, Snežana?
Of course, it's really important to cooperate with all stakeholders who are important. That means that the local youth organizations are someone who can support young people in their efforts and give them the better knowledge and of course skills. But it's important also that the people from the school, directors, principals recognize the importance of the work of the NGO organizations. Sometimes they do not believe them. They think they are doing something which is not so important for the young people, or their succeed. Maybe they're not who they are, So, but we have in Serbia some kind of the register of the youth organizations dealing with the youth issue, so everyone can see on our site. And if we have some programs and projects dealing with the youth in education system, for example, or in the local level, then we can also usually write together with the NGO organization to the local school authorities. It is something very important. We also sometimes give that information to the Ministry of Education, because they really, the principals want to see. They do not learn even now to be like independence. Usually they ask for permission for everything. Even they, according to the law of education system, they have responsibility, and of course they can be decision makers in their schools environment. So there's something challenges which we must will work again. And I think that it's very important to involve the NGO organizations, youth representatives together in the, not only in the process of developing the strategy, other documents, programs, but also in the process of monitoring and evaluating all these things, because they can see something maybe which government cannot see. And I must say that in Serbia now it's one very interesting thing which we are trying to do. We will make together with the NGO organization, different ministries, republic institutions for the statistics, some kind of the youth well-being index in Serbia, youth well-being index in Serbia, we call that. So what does it mean? That all the measures and indicators which we put in the strategy and which will be followed with the activities in the action plan, which will be developed in April this year, we can measure every year on the yearly basis where we are. But we do not put only the indicators from the strategy. We also put that broader indicators which are really important for the youth, even they are not in the youth strategy, but they are in another strategies, and or youth said it's important for us. And that youth well-being index will be piloting this year, and the next year, 2024, we will try to put in the function. We develop that with the UNFPI together and the DIVATS Foundation. And I hope that we have the working group, that it will be something very, very specific and very useful, because all stakeholders together try to think about that. We will pilot it first of all on the local level, does it work, and what we can change, then on the national level. So that's something I think very important and very, very good tool. If we really succeed to have that, we will share with you, of course.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're coming to the end now. I just have perhaps a final question for you, Manuela, and it concerns an interview which we did here at ETF in our recent newsletter, Learning Connects, edition number 10. And my colleagues will post the link, and a lovely article. Thank you to both of you, Snežana and Manuela, for agreeing to that interview. And it was a very touching article, I have to say. And the points raised, one of them, Manuela, you talked about the work within and the work without, the work that the young person is doing in their environment. And then you also mentioned the work within. Do you think that, let's say, do you think policymakers are really taking this seriously now?
Yes, I think yes. Snežana, I think yes.
Me too.
Yes. No,
Me too.
I think personally, I mean, I've been working with policymakers and for policymakers for the last 23 years. I think the issue of, and I've been always very attached to the well-being and the inclusion. So also in the past, I worked a lot about diversity, inclusion, and also in many countries of the world. So it's not that before it was not on the radar. It was indeed a policy question, and there were already a lot of actions to work on this. However, I think that the pandemic, but also the risks that we see associated to the complexity of the society have had an impact in terms of really, an alarm that is ringing and you cannot stop it. We see things that we have never seen in the past, hospitals that are full of young people really suffering, parents that are incapable to deal with certain issues that are far from their experience and what they lived through. Teachers that cannot connect to the students that they have because there are issues that they cannot master. So this requires, I would say, a new pact of dedication and in fact, a new policy effort. And I think this is a strong preoccupation of policymakers because it's about the future. It's about, in the past we were talking about, dropouts, and remedies, or what you do for people who are at the margin of society. Today, this margin of society are so many and are so complex that require new policies in place. We are talking about new poverties, for example. And poverty is, for example, the inability to be socially connected, not on social media, but be connected as humans, being able to talk to each other, being able to find a solution, to seek for help. These are the new poverties. And the preoccupation is really that we put at risk our future as countries, our future as economies, but our future as humans. And so I think that, yes, the preoccupation on finding these policies, solutions, and building a new, I would say, architecture for inclusion and for well-being, it's a real preoccupation for policymakers, but we see also it's a preoccupation and an effort of schools, of companies that more and more put well-being and mental health at the heart also of their HR policies, for example, much more as compared to before. And this is not only about, being nice to each other. It's about making sure that our talent and our skills are used at best to build a society for the future. So it's very important.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Manuela, for those inspirational words. And I will turn to Snežana now for your final thoughts on the topic. Please.
First of all, I must completely agree with Manuela and the words about the policymakers and what does it really mean for the companies, for the education system, if they have think about the personal life, not only the tasks and personality of the people. I can share one example of the good practice. For example, tomorrow, our youth organization, Youth Umbrella organization, organized the conversation or dialogue between the youths and the Prime Minister. So every year they make the dialogue. They talk. The young people talk with the Prime Minister, and different ministries coming also with the Prime Minister. Not only the ministry responsible for the youth, but different ministries, and talk about their position, their topics. They choose the topics, and after the 1 year or year or half of year, it depends on the time. In pandemic, it was less. They see where they are after they finalize the conclusions. So that means that really the policymakers want to hear. At the beginning, I remember, because I'm many years first in the education system, then with the youth policy working, that at the beginning different ministries do not want to hear much more about the youth. They think that they have the youth ministries, so why to think about them? Now the situation is different, and also something which we put in the Serbia is the law of the planning system. That law talks about what every strategy in the Serbia must have, and they put that they must have the conversation, the participation of those of whom strategy is. That means the young people finally in different strategies, not only the youth strategies, are someone who will be asked when they develop and monitor that strategy. That's it.
Well, thank you very much to both of you, Snežana, Manuela, for a really enjoyable and essential conversation, I think. And I would like to conclude by saying that youth well-being and skills development are totally intertwined. They're essential. As you said in the article, we can't have one without the other. Thank you to you, our audience. Thank you for all your questions. Looking forward to seeing you in the next ETF Learning Connects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.